After the fiasco with the 2.8 livestream, which I was lucky to not have been part of since I was playing D&D, we finally get a sneak peek of Sumeru. And let me tell you, I'm really excited. Just from the crumbs we've been seeing in the game, I think everyone's really worried or scared of what's to come in Sumeru. From both a lore and gameplay perspective, mostly. I think we can all agree that Sumeru is such an important part of the game because it's the perfect midpoint. It's where the story can finally set its grounds by introducing the lore slowly without worrying if players get the context or not. And it's finally where the story can rack up its stakes since it's a midpoint of the Archon quests. Or they don't, and Hoyo doesn't let Genshin's story ramp up its dark factor. Story, not lore. There's a difference. Regardless, we finally got a shot of Sumeru and even a voice drop of its Archon. Presumably. Please be the Archon. So, welcome to Dissecting the Sumeru Preview, where I'll be breaking down the Sumeru Preview and giving my personal thoughts on the current reveals of Sumeru's map. We first get a sneak peek of a young-sounding voice that I can only think is Kusanali. But when she's talking about the sandy beaches and the waters, that's most likely not Sumeru, but instead the Golden Apple Archipelago, so we can skip over that dialogue. Though, what I find interesting is that she says she'll embark knowledge onto you, not wisdom, which are two separate things. Given Kusanali's disposition as being a curious creature, it's possible that almost everything that Kusanali will give the traveler is book knowledge, or Archon knowledge that she garnered over the years of her existence, but not exactly wisdom. Consider it like you study for a test so you inherently memorize what you know, but don't exactly have any practical idea how to apply it. Of course, I'm not saying that Kusanali is unwise, but given the Sumeru hints that Dainsleif gave us in the Tivat trailer, I'm going to assume that this is because Kusanali is feigning ignorance when it comes to the other more notorious things happening in her nation. Continuing with Kusanali, she might be a reference to the Kusanali Jataka. According to Wikipedia, the Jatakas are a body of literature native to South Asia, which mainly concern the previous births of Gautama Buddha in both human and animal form. In Kusanali's case, the character might have been inspired by a sprite living in a humble clump of kusha grass. A fascinating allegory is that there was a tree in the legend that was about to be cut down by a king. This tree belonged to a tree sprite named Ananda. The king needed the tree to hold up the roof of his castle, and despite his respect for the tree fairy, he decided to cut it down. The king made important sacrifices before cutting the tree. As a response, the tree fairy of the Kusa grass devised a plan to stop the cutting of the tree. He disguised himself as a chameleon and got into the tree, and made it look like the tree was filled with holes. To that, the axe-wielding carpenters felt like the tree was inadequate and rotten, and left it to be. Thus, that's how the tree sprite saved Ananda's tree. The connection to the Dendro Archon to this legend is pretty numerous. Besides the name, we also have the mysterious voice in 2.8. We can theorize from the 2.8 event that Kusanali is able to create mirages and illusions, as exemplified by the domains and the amplified power of the Fatui's machine being fashioned in her power. It was never confirmed to be Kusanali's though, so this is all just speculation. But the voice and the way that she speaks of trading information with the traveler by asking their utmost insight in the situation is very similar to how the voice in the trailer wants to trade knowledge through stories. When I was streaming, people pointed out that the word mirage is constantly repeated, which might allude to Sumeru's true nature being illusory. Now, while Venti is also capable of making illusions, I think it's simply because they're both sprite-like creatures. But Kusanali's power specializes in more massive creations based on a person's psyche. It would be fitting for a god of wisdom that was blinded by mirages, as said in the Devat trailer by Dainsleif. Regardless, that's all we can deduce from that one. Let's go back to Sumeru. She drops that Sumeru is a land of both deserts and jungles. The jungles aspect of Sumeru is something we've been shown in the trailer, and as for the deserts part of Sumeru, this is shown to us in the manga. The desert areas of Sumeru have palm trees and windows that I think are called mashrabiyah. It is a type of projecting oriel window, enclosed with carved wood latticework located on the top floors of a building, sometimes enhanced with stained glass. It was traditionally used to catch wind and for passive cooling. In the trailer though, we get a look of the rainforest side of Sumeru, which I'm guessing is the area connected to Liyue. I love the aesthetic of Sumeru. Mondstadt had a lot of open plains, while Liyue has very distinct warm colors. So this aesthetic feels absolutely amazing. The whole nation looks really distinct, and to the person that designed this place, massive props for making the place eye-catching. Plus, the music in the background is phenomenal. I'm really curious, does anyone know what instruments they use to achieve this vibe? There's a certain melody to Middle Eastern music that I can never really grasp, and I'm thinking it has something to do with the instruments that they used. Regardless, the forests of Sumeru have much thicker trees than anywhere we've seen, and we even see small huts and tree houses attached to the branches. We also know from the Sheesh room that Sumeru has a lot of mushrooms, sentient or otherwise. And in the Sumeru preview teaser for Dendro, it's an environmental mechanic that we can interact with. I'm sure that we'll see more of those talking mushrooms in the future, given they said they were from Sumeru. There's an elven forest vibe that's really present in the trailer, like how you'd see in other fantasy games where there are huts and areas in the middle of forests where wanderers stay. I'm sure that Sumeru also has their fair share of fae-like creatures like tree sprites. When I first saw this trailer, Sumeru feels very druidic. Druids and rangers in common RPGs are people attuned to nature. It's also great to note that druid and rangers in Dungeons & Dragons use wisdom as their means of interacting with magic, so that's a fascinating, but most likely accidental, connection. Regardless, I can definitely see characters like Kazuha, Venti, or Albedo being must-haves in this place, given there's so much climbing. Fun fact, this screenshot reminds me of that one coastal island in Final Fantasy X called Besaid. But the thing is, I can't remember what the name of this architecture is, if there even is a name. The design is when the roof extends so far down that it wraps around the walls of the entrance. This essentially serves as isolation. It's very common in souvenir shops, honestly, but I'm sure this architecture has a name. My whole history search is nothing but roofs at this point, so I give up. Though I'm a little more enlightened by the 37 types of roofs. Yay. Moving on though, we get to the very distinct building at the center of an island, and I'm almost eager to say that this is Sumeru Academia if it weren't so small. For a more than 500-year-old prestigious academy, I would think it's at least the size of Mondstadt's cathedral. Or maybe it has underground facilities given it's on an isolated island. Regardless, I believe this might just be a shrine or an open courtyard for people to visit. We do see some Sumeru NPCs in the shot, and appeared in the distance. But the next entrance shot of a mysterious building is giving me academia vibes. Mosaic glass is very common in Islamic architecture. However, the abundance of reference nations in Sumeru are what make the source material difficult to pinpoint. It's not like in Inazuma where you can clearly derive from Japan or Liyue for China. This one can be quite mishmashed, unfortunately. Mosaic glass first appeared in Egypt around 1400 BC and has been produced intermittently for 3,500 years up to the present date. The technique gained popularity in different areas of glass production, usually for short periods. It is seen in the Hellenistic art after ancient Egypt, then in Rome and Alexandria in the 4th century AD. Though mosaics are an important design in a lot of Middle Eastern architecture, mostly inside of cathedrals, fortresses, and arcades. Though the design of the mosaics in the trailer don't really convey the same pattern style, given that Islamic mosaic art has a more bullseye aesthetic, where there are a lot of extending layers outside of a center figure. But there are also a lot of mosaic art depicting stories, people, trees, environments, and animals. So let's see if they incorporate more of that into the story. Maybe it's just because this is outside, though the outside windows have a lot of flower depictions, which I find really cute. Or maybe this is a whole style entirely and I could just be completely wrong. Maybe it took inspiration from other Middle Eastern architecture? I'd love to hear more about that in the future if ever. And the last piece of info that I'm curious about is the Statue of the Seven. As we know, Kusanali isn't the first Denjo Archon, it was the god of the woods, but it's her statue currently placed in Sumeru. The figure on the statue is a seated small figure, and if this isn't Little Lord Kusanali, I don't know what is. Which begs the question, do the statues of the Seven adjust based on their current Archon, or is there something deeper we're not aware of? Because if that's the case, this debunks the theory that the 7 statues in Inazuma are Makoto, not Ei. And that means that whoever is the current Archon gets to have their mugshot on the statue. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Regardless, yes, those are my current thoughts on the Sumeru from the trailer, though I'm really excited for things to come and I hope you guys are too. What are your thoughts on the coming nation of Dendro? Oh, and as a little ask for help, I am not really well versed with the historical references in Sumeru. My knowledge extends to at most Google, so if there are anyone out there that specializes in their local history, please feel free to comment if I made any mistakes. Legends are really difficult to fact check, especially the one with Kusanali Jataka, and so it is what it is. Anyway, that's it for me. My name is Aster and thank you so much for chilling with me. But continuing with Kusanali, she might be a reference to the Kusanali Jataka. How do you pronounce that? Jataka.